Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a weekly deep dive into the world of college admissions.
My name is Vince, and I've been doing admissions since 1989 and college counseling since 1998 in California.
I'm Lisa, and I'm a clinical psychologist and college counselor. I have a daughter in college, a daughter in high school, and a son in middle school. After 30 years in Chicago, we recently moved to North Carolina.
My name is Mark. I'm a college coach in Atlanta and the parent of two daughters. Karis, a graduate of Davidson College, and she is the founder of the Spanish tutoring company, SpanishHelpToday.com. And Joy is a wellness coach at the Keenan Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And I'm so blessed to be able to work alongside both my beautiful daughters at School Match for You, a college counseling firm that I founded in 2010. Good morning, friends. If you're a first-time listener of the Your College Bound Kid podcast, we have a mission here, and that mission is to make college knowledge available to all. And we do this by doing deep dives on topics. Sometimes we do college spotlights on visits one of our team has recently had, or we interview a thought leader in the world of college admissions who works at a school, and they either tell us about their college or they go very deep on a topic about college or college admissions. Sometimes we talk about hot topics that are in the news, and increasingly we've been answering more of your questions. We have 9 co-hosts. We all live in different states: Boston, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Illinois, Missouri, Colorado, California. And between the 9 of us, we have approximately 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Our focus is not on showing you how to get into Harvard, although if you ask us a question on that, we're going to answer that. But our focus is on encouraging students to love and accept. But our focus is on encouraging parents to love and accept their students for who they are, recognize how amazing they are for who they are, and letting families know that there's no such thing as best college. There's only best college match. We focus on the fact that education is a lifelong pursuit of knowledge, and college is an important step, but just a few miles along a lifelong run that will be a marathon. And then ultimately, it's not where you go, but it's what you do when you get there, and it's what you do when you get out of there. And we believe that match and fit is more important than the name on the sweatshirt you wear or the bumper sticker on your car. Now, you should know, friends, that I am particularly stoked this morning. There are 4 or 5 things that have me in a great mood. First of all, my Michigan State Spartans are number 1 of all 18 teams in the Big Ten in hoops. And last time I came on here, we were number 2, and our rival Michigan was number 1, but we went into their gym and beat them by 13, and they hadn't lost a game at home all year. So we usurped their first place, and we're in first all by ourselves, although we've got challenging games at College Park in Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa, and one more match again with Michigan before we head into the NCAA tournament. Now, it gets better than that. Last night, my Lakers blew out Denver, in the Mile High Stadium. Sorry, Denver. Sorry, Colorado residents. 123-100. We held 3-time MVP Jokic to 2 baskets and 6 turnovers. Now, my brother lives in Denver, and he's a diehard Nuggets fan, and he has been insufferable for the last 2 years, blowing up my phone with his trash talk. So last night felt really good, and I might even watch the game again today if I have time. Next, Karis, our 28-year-old, is driving back from Durham as we speak. And in about 7 hours, we will have 100 counselors gather for our Counselors Connect second meeting ever. We're very excited about that. Now, on top of all, the weather's been great in Atlanta, and even our daffodils are coming out, which is a signal that spring's around the corner. Before we jump into today's episode, I think you know, listeners, that I love it when you recognize our co-hosts, and if someone takes the time to send something in positive about one of our co-hosts or even one of our guests, there's a high probability that I'm going to play it. So next you will hear some comments from a listener about one of our hosts, and really the whole team, but it's a message from Andrea from New Jersey, who just appreciates something that was said on the most recent podcast.
Hi, Mark. This is Andrea from New Jersey. I just wanted to thank you generally for everything that you and the team do. And then I wanted to, because I know you like when we give specific shout outs to your team members, I just wanted to thank you or relay my thanks to Hillary. While I always learn something from all your hosts, I just think she has such a wonderful way of speaking authentically, I think, to the parents. And it made me really think about this when she had her answer on the most recent episode about kids and their authenticity. And I thought she just spoke about it really in a very helpful and down to earth way. So thank you to Hillary and thank you to everyone for all you guys do. Really appreciate it.
Okay, friends, enough about my week, or even enough about a shout out from one of our co hosts. Let's talk about today's episode. At the end of episode 511, I said I was going to do a two-part series on how the finances of college are being impacted by the decisions of the current administration, and it's leading to financial distress and even financial crisis in some instances. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a college counselor, and he said, I don't even know how to do my job anymore. I have decided to push that back for 2 weeks, partly because I'm still researching, partly because another question from a listener came in that I wanted to do a deep dive on that I thought was really time sensitive on the common data set. I want to answer that now because there's info in the CDS, the common data set, that really could impact some decisions that seniors make. And while I've done a deep dive on the common data set before, never gone as deep as I'm going to go with you today. And then next week, I want to tackle a question I'm repeatedly asked and is more important than ever. How can I know the colleges my student is considering are in good financial shape? I've talked about that before, but it's been bits and pieces here and there. I'm going to pull together a lot of stuff for you guys. And then 3 weeks from now, I hope to come back and talk about what the new administration is doing that is significantly impacting the financial health of so many colleges. But I'm also going to have some good news for you in that segment. It's not all gloom and doom. And just to give you a taste of what I'm going to be talking about then, literally, friends, as I was about to log into my computer today, an article popped up on my phone from the Daily Pennsylvanian, which is UPenn's, one of their newspapers. And I'm going to just read it to you just to give you a little bit of a taste of what you're going to get when I talk about this topic in a few weeks. So the title is Penn to Reduce Graduate Admissions, Rescind Acceptances Amid Federal Research Funding Grants. And this article came out 2 days ago, Friday at 10:29 p.m. So it's really, really short. I'm going to read it to you quickly. Penn directed department chairs to significantly reduce admission rates across graduate programs in the face of federal research and funding cuts, multiple faculty members told the Daily Pennsylvanian. On Friday, Penn notified department chairs that it will cut admissions across graduate programs, a decision faculty members say was made after programs had already accepted students. Professors expressed frustration over the lack of transparency from the university, with some attributing the cuts to broader funding issues, including a proposed $240 million funding reduction from the National Institutes of Health, NIH, and warned that the decision will impact Penn's research and educational mission, particularly within the School of Arts and Sciences. So that's just one thing. You guys know that my daughter works at UNC Chapel Hill. She shared how some of her coworkers were in tears when the chancellor shared that they would be cutting 200 courses. One of the people that she spoke to, she's become pretty good friends with. She's taught 2 of the courses that are being cut for over a decade, and she absolutely loved to teach those 2 courses. So that's just a little bit of a taste of some of the changes going on. I'll come back to that at a much later date, but I wanted to give you a little bit of a taste for some of the things I'll be sharing. But like I said, it's not going to be all gloom and doom. There is a little bit of a rainbow I see at the end of the tunnel, but we'll get back to that. So friends, after I take this QFL from a listener on the common data set, then we'll have part 2 of 5 of my interview with Kathleen deLaski on her book, Who Needs College Anymore? Special thanks to our listeners who have now sent in over 400 questions or comments sent in via SpeakPipe. There's no College Bound Kid without our listeners, without our amazing listeners. So without any further ado, let's dive in and play this question from a listener that caused me to cause an audible and fast track this question to the top of our list and play it today.
Hi, Mark and the YCBK team. My name is Lara, and I'm calling again with another question for you. The more I listen to your episodes, the more I think about how we navigated my son's college admissions process. He's a senior and has some great options. And what I might need to do differently for my daughter, who's a current sophomore and will likely be looking at totally different schools than he did. I'd love to hear more about the Common Data Set and how families can use this information. When I first learned of the Common Data Set, my mind was blown. I was overwhelmed by the amount of information that the schools provide. I mostly focused on Section C, but I'm wondering if there are other sections worth really looking at depending on where you are in the process with your student. I just feel like it is this treasure trove of data that a lot of families don't know about. How can the average family use the Common Data Set? Thanks so much and continue the great work.
So friends, the Common Data Set started because there was so much noise out there when it comes to numbers. You ever heard the saying, you can make data believe whatever you want? Well, there's truth to that, right? So in order to crack down on the noise and in order to have clarity when it comes to a clear definition of terms, most schools agreed to gather information with a standardized form and use it in a standardized way. In other words, one institution doesn't have the choice to use their own definition of a term or to present the information in a different order. Every school must use the same formatting. So section B2 at one school is the same as section B2 at another. Colleges have departments of institutional research that gather this data, and they're going to have cooperation from another departments within the college. So, for example, the admissions department will cooperate and provide a lot of admissions data, residential life, You'll also get a lot of financial information that will come from those departments and a number of other things as well. There's no commondataset.org or commondataset.com, but more than 95% of colleges do participate and make their data available. So how do you find it? Honestly, the easiest way is just to Google it. If you wanted to go to find the Common Data Set for University of Texas at Dallas, I did this. You could put Common Data Set UTD and it pulls up. Unfortunately, they're a little dated in what they're releasing to the public. So then I did it again, Common Data Set University of Texas at Austin. And there's a wealth of information. And you can also find it by going to the school's institutional research page. In fact, I'm going to go off here on a tangent for a sec. But I went down a rabbit trail that was pretty exciting if you're like me, a data nerd. So I was on UT Austin's institutional research page. And when I was there, I found they had the coolest thing. They have comparison data available between UT Austin and a whole bunch of colleges that they regard as peer institutions. So you literally can compare UT Austin to about 20 different colleges that they look at as their institutional peers. So if you want to track things like admissions rate and enrollment, if you're a data nerd, you literally could spend a couple of days here on this stuff. Like that's how rich it is. It's quite robust. For UT Austin, they listed what the schools were that were in their comparative circle. And schools pick who their peer institutions are for a lot of reasons. A lot of times it's who we overlap with a lot, or other times it's who's similar size and budgets. But UT Austin picked the following schools: University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, University of Washington in Seattle, University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, University of Florida, Gainesville, Purdue University, University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan State University, East Lansing, University of Wisconsin-Madison, Penn State, University Park, UCLA, Indiana University, Cal Berkeley, UC San Diego, UNC Chapel Hill. So all that data was there with comparative graphs and charts and tables. And I don't want to overstate it, but there were clearly over 50 different variables that you could run and compare UT Austin to those schools. So don't neglect the institutional research page, because there's I can't talk enough about how important that is as a source of information. But coming back to the common data set, which is often housed there, what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through each section, and I'm not going to mention everything, but it's going to be the deepest dive I've done. I remember doing about a 15-minute deep dive on common data set a couple of years ago. It was a couple of years ago. We get new listeners all the time, but I'm going to go longer than that today. Just mentioning some of the stuff that's in each section that I think would be of interest to you. That's what our listener asked for, and that's what I want to do. First of all, I should say a few things about common data set, that I haven't said. So this information is provided for Peterson's, the College Board, U.S. News, like automatically, and then some other places. The stated goal is to provide accurate, timely data to students and their families, which also can reduce the workload for administrators because they can rely on this data. And publishers can use this data as well because it asks the same core questions. Some of them use it in their rankings or their publications or their institutions. All right. So the common data set is divided into sections, and the sections go from A through J. And the one you hear about the most on our podcast and any admissions podcast is going to be section C, because that's first year admissions data. I'm going to touch on section C and share some things you probably don't know that's in there. But what I really want to do is focus on some of the other sections that really get overlooked. So let's start out with section A. Well, section A is general data. And here's where you'll find the address of the school, the admission address, the admission phone number, the admission email. They'll say there is common data set on their website. There'll be a direct link to their website. If you jump down to section A5, it has all the degrees offered. A6 talks about the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Office with the link to that. And that's a quick overview of some of the things that might be of interest to you in section A. All right, now section B. This is another one that families really find valuable because this is enrollment and persistence data. Okay, so this is who's in the school. What's the composition of the class? So really important, right? So you can look at undergraduate students. You can look at students who are first-year students only or total students. You look at part-time versus full-time, and you can look at data by gender. A lot of times I'll go in here and I'll look to see who's got a really big gender skew, and knowing that could present an opportunity for somebody if they're of the opposite gender, because oftentimes you've heard me say colleges want what they don't have, right? Section B2 is going to have enrollment data by race and ethnicity. So it's going to break it down: international, Hispanic, Latino, Black, African American, white, non-Hispanic, American Indian, Alaskan Native, non-Hispanic, Asian, non-Hispanic, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, 2 or more races, and that's in there. Then you get number of degrees by type. So you can see a breakdown by certificates and diplomas, bachelor's and master's, doctoral degrees. And then from B4 all the way to B21, they have graduation rate data. So you can feast out there if you're into graduation rate data. If you want to know retention data, that's going to be B22. Now, retention is the percentage of students who come back for the second year. So that's in B22. Now let's jump to section C, probably the one you're most familiar with. But I've probably mentioned some things you may not know are here. So you can look at first-time admissions. That's all a C, right? We'll talk about like other types of admissions later. C1, total number of students who applied, total number of students who were admitted, total number of students who were enrolled. Okay? This is where you can see stuff like acceptance rate and yield data. You can break it down by full-time and part-time, by men, by women, and unknown, which is the category they use. You can look at in-state versus out-of-state versus international. I want to see where people are coming from. C2 is waitlist data. I use this all the time. One of the students I'm working with is waitlisted. The first thing I do is I go to the CDS, Common Data Set CDS, to find out what percentage of students were waitlisted, because in there, it's going to not only say how many were waitlisted, but how many came off the waitlist. Now, I find I need to track a few years because I might look at a year and there might be nobody that came off the waitlist. And the year before, it might be 11%. So I like to look at a few years worth of data on that just to get a sense of what are the chances, just statistically, of getting a spot off the waitlist, because most schools, unfortunately, don't share that. But it's here. Let's jump over to C5. C5's got some helpful information because it has the number of courses by major that are required. So if you want to know how many courses are going to be required in science and the visual arts and in foreign language for this school, it's going to be there. So, you want to make sure you're at least taking the minimum course requirements for each school. And they got the information right here. Pretty important when you're making curriculum choices, right? Section C7, which is legendary. This is where you have the basis of selection. In other words, schools are telling you what they're using to make admissions decision. Is it very important, the thing? Is it important? Is it considered, or is it not important? So it's broken down into those 4 categories. And once again, super, super, super helpful information. So I know what some of you are thinking. Well, what are the categories? So under academic would be the rigor of the secondary school record. Once again, they can rank that as very important, important, somewhat important, considered, or not important. Sorry, let me say it again. Very important, somewhat important, considered, not important. Class rank, academic GPA, academic, not cumulative, so math, English, science, social studies, foreign language. Recommendations, standardized test scores, and the essay. Those are your academic factors. And then it has your non-academic factors, such as interview, extracurriculars, talent ability, personal qualities, first-gen status, alumni or legacy, geographic residence, state residency, religious affiliation, volunteer work, and level of an applicant's interest, also known as DI or demonstrated interest. So this is where you can go on to see the self-assessment of a school, whether or not they're using interest, meaning your interest in the school, meaning what's the chances of you coming. Now, the one thing I tell people, think of this as more of a blunt instrument than a precise instrument. So if you were to go into our drawer in our house, we have a bunch of different knives. We got a butter knife section, which is a knife and it cuts, but it's kind of blunt. And then we got like those sharper steak knives. This is more like the butter knife. So there can be nuance and variations because, for example, sometimes I'll look at a school under what they put for level of an applicant's interest, and they might say considered, and I might be like, that's really important at that school. Well, their definition of considered is different than mine or yours. Well, here's what I would say when it comes to interest, just to play it safe. Whatever they say, add one category. So if they say considered, think of it as important. If they think important, think of it as very important. Now, when it says not important at all, most of the time that is going to be true. Of course, exceptions could be early decision or wait lists. Interest still can come into play with things like that. But by and large, those ones that say not important, those are not places that a lot of times families are driving all across the country just to visit a place thinking they're quote unquote scoring demonstrated interest points. And they're really not doing anything to impact the decision when it comes to that. But it's just something to be aware of, right? So all that is under section C in the C7 section, basis of selection. Now, C8 has a lot of good information on ACT and SAT about their policies. And are any of the following thing used in placement? And the choices it gives are SAT, ACT, AP, CLEP. We've done stuff on CLEP before. Go back and check our interview on CLEP. Institutional exams, state exams. So those are all things that you'll find in C8. C9 has for enroll. Remember, this is all enrolled students. Sometimes people think common data set is admitted students, or it's even students that apply. No, this is enrolled students. It's important for you to know that. So C9 has test scores that were submitted for enrolled students, ACT and SAT. It'll have the raw number of people and the percentage of people, and then it'll have a breakdown of the middle 50%. All right, so this is a good place to find out, like, how are most people submitting test scores here, and how do my test scores compare? C10 has information about rank, percentage of people who enrolled with a rank. C11 has GPA data. It breaks it down by 4.0, 3.7 to 3.99, 3.5 to 3.74, 3.25 to 3.49, 3 to 3.24, 2.5 to 2.99, 2.0 to 2.49, 1 to 1.99, and under 1. Now, one thing you can get frustrated with sometimes with CDS, even that it's standardized format, not everybody has to submit everything. So I get frustrated when I go try to look up test score data and it's not there, or GPA data and it's not there. Just understand they do have the right to not share on a particular question. They just can't change the whole organization and formatting and come up with their own questions they want to substitute. Now, there's a bunch of stuff in some of these other C sections. I'll just blow through these pretty quickly. C13, application fee information. C14, closing date, if you want to know like final dates for submitting to schools. C15, acceptance rate data. C16, notification data. C18, deferral data. That can be really helpful, right? Want to know about deferrals. C19, early admissions data. C21, early decision data. C22, early action data. So for admissions people, that's kind of a gold mine section. Section D, this is where first place I go for transfers, because Section D is everything you want to know about transfer admissions. So D2 looks at applicants admitted and enrolled transfer data. Applicants admitted, enrolled. D3, it talks about the different terms that you can transfer into. D4, minimum requirements. D5, requirements. D7, minimum college GPA, and then D9, any application specific dates. All right, Section E, it's the different academic offerings that the school has. All right, so you want to know the different academic offerings that the school has? You want to go to Section E. And there can be some really good information in here. So in Section E, you have like the different special study options that the school has the different academic offerings. So, for example, what am I talking about? Do they offer accelerated programs? Do they offer cross-registration, distance learning, double major, dual enrollment, English as a second language, exchange student information, external degree programs, honors programs, independent study, internships, student design majors, teacher certificate programs, undergraduate research? Like those are the kinds of things. So the different academic program offerings that the school offers are all there in Section E. And then in Section F, there's really good, this is another section that gets overlooked. There's really good information here on student life in Section F. You want to know like what the life is like at the college? There's some fantastic information. There's stuff in here that people ask me all the time and they have no idea that it's in here. For example, F1, the percentage of people in fraternities. F, the percentage of women in sororities. The percentage of students that stay in college-owned housing. The percentage of students that live off campus and commute. Like these are questions I'm asked all the time. I don't want to go to commuter school. There's the data. You can decide if it's commuter residential enough. I want fraternities. I don't want fraternities. I want sororities. I don't want sororities. You can compare all your schools with the percentage of people involved in sororities and fraternities, and you can see the places where sororities and fraternities play a bigger role in the culture of the school. All that is there in Section F1. In F2, you have the activities that are offered. In F3, you have ROTC information. And F4, you have a lot of information on housing in F4. So what do I mean by information on housing? Well, can you stay in apartments for married students? Do they have that? Do they have apartments for single students? Do they have co-ed residence halls? Do they have co-op housing? Do they have fraternity sorority housing? Do they have living learning communities? Okay. Do they have men's residence hall? Do they have special housing for international students? Special housing for students with disabilities? Theme-based housing? Women's residence hall? All that's in F4. So this residential life piece is a rich part of Common Data Set and one that often gets overlooked. Okay, remember I told you it's A through J. So I'm going to pick it up a little. Section G, all about their annual expenses are in there. Net price calculators, billable, non-billable fees are itemized. I don't look at Common Data Set for this much because Common Data Set information tends to be a year old. And when I want to go to financial stuff, I'll go right to the website to get the current year. And finances and that is, to me, is a better source, but you should know it's there. Now, Section H, super important. It's everything about money, financial aid. There's so much in here. Like H1 has the money that goes for need-based aid to undergraduate students. It talks about the federal money they get, the state money, the institutional money, the external scholarship money. What percentage of students and how much money is going for self-help? That's loans and work study. And H2 is a total treasure trove if you're looking for either merit-based money or if you're looking to find out the tuition discount rate or the net tuition revenue for a school. H2 is just a total gold mine Because, for example, if you go to H2A, you can see the number of students that do not qualify for need-based aid, but they get it anyway. In other words, merit money. How much does the average of merit award, and what percentage of people are getting merit money? I have a lot more I want to say in section H2, but I'm going to hold off on that for when I get into how you can evaluate a college's financial health. But once again, they have it broken down by applied for, who applied for merit money, how many were awarded, and how many received it. H5 has information on student borrowing. H6 has undergraduate degrees for non-residents, the number and the amount. So if you're a non-resident, this is going to be really important to you. It has the process for non-resident families with dates and deadlines and the criteria for awarding money. Section I has stuff on class size and a lot of really helpful stuff on class size. It also has stuff on faculty size as well. It has breakdowns on the number of faculty of color, women faculty, men faculty, international faculty. That's important to you. This is where you go to get it. Highest degree awarded in their field. How many have that? Student faculty ratio. It has class sections broken down by the following class sizes. How many classes have 2 to 9, 10 to 19, 20 to 29, 30 to 39, 40 to 49, 50 to 59, or 100 or more? If you want small classes, this is a real great place to go compare. And then in section J, it has degrees awarded in each major by percentage. So this can be a really good indication of how strong is a department. So for example, I looked up UT Austin and I wanted to see what were their 4 programs that have the highest percentage of students in them. Well, I'll tell you what it was. Engineering, 13.68%. Business marketing, 11.62%. Biology, life science, 11.44%. And communication journalism, 10.58%. So when you add all of that up, and I'm doing this really quickly in my head, you get about 38%. So didn't do the math right. 23, 36, 37, 48%. So almost half of students at UT Austin are majoring in engineering, business and marketing, biology, life sciences, communication, journalism. Those are strong programs. If I did this for American University, you know what's going to be at the top? Political science, international relations. Those are strong programs. So one way of seeing how strong the programs are is where are people flocking to, because they're only flocking there usually because the programs are good with good faculty and, good reputations, job placement, all that stuff. And then the last thing is definitions. All the definitions they use are there at the end. So it's just a great way to get all this information. Now, I'll say a few things. I go to Common Data Set, but sometimes I take shortcuts because it can take a while to go in there and do data mining. And there are a number of collaborators out there that just take Common Data Set information and put them into a user form for you. There's a lot. My favorite 3 that I use all the time are College Navigator, Big Future, and collegedata.com. Those are my 3 favorites, but there's lots of other collaborators out there as well. So all they're doing is taking the information from here and producing it for you in a form where it's quick and easy to access. Also, keep in mind some of this information is 1 year old, and sometimes if I want to get the student profile of the incoming class, you can get it faster at a place like College Kickstart on their blog because they're pulling right from schools, releasing the brand new information, usually in their newspapers, and they're posting it there. So usually it's not much of a factor because usually a lot doesn't change from 1 year to the next, but occasionally it does. So there are a few caveats there. And once again, not every school participates. Some schools don't have more recent data. Some schools choose not to answer certain questions, but overall, treasure trove of data. Hopefully this was helpful. I know I got really wonky and weedsy, but I think you guys can handle it. All right, friends, we'll transition to my interview with Kathleen deLaski, looking at who needs college.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
Friends, in part 2 of my interview with Kathleen deLaski, Kathleen talks about an experience she had that made her realize just how stressful the college admissions process has become. Kathleen talks about the 150 interviews she did with a wide range of people to prepare before she wrote the book. Kathleen talks about the growth of skills-based hiring instead of degree-based hiring. Kathleen talks about the four types of people who do need college. Listen and enjoy.
Skills are changing so fast. I mean, we're experiencing the biggest skills shakeup probably this is a little bit debatable, but certainly since the Industrial Revolution, if not before. And what that means is that the rate of change of the skills that you have today versus the ones you'll need in even 5 years when maybe you finish your degree will might change by 20% or 25%. I mean, I think the one statistic shows that LinkedIn shows that skills have changed in like 25% in like 7 years. And so when you think about what does that mean for what you would learn in college, you could say, okay, well, college is supposed to be more theoretical anyway. We're supposed to learn, critical thinking and collaboration and just get a really good baseline. But increasingly at the same time, one of the trends is that learners are expecting that college is going to land them their first job. That's been a change in trends since I went to college, 30, 40 years ago as well, right? Which is that the reason people go to college now is really to get employed versus, in my day, I don't think we thought about it very much. I mean, we were just sort of this idea that you were becoming a citizen of the world, sounded good, right? We weren't so transactional in our thinking, as I recall. And surveys bear that out.
Yeah, Jeff Salengo's done some work on this.
Yes, he has.
And he was absolutely shocked to see what people are saying now. And he said the same thing. That thought never even crossed my mind when I went to college.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's completely the expectation. You did an experiment a while ago where you used one of these statistical models out there to see what your chances would be at getting into Duke, where you went a few decades ago. Talk about that and how that impacted your thinking as well.
Yeah, this was kind of depressing because I wish that the AI bot that I used, when I did this last spring had been available when my own children were going through the gauntlet, which my kids were, in high school in around 2010, which was kind of the heyday of when the most people were going to college, actually. So I put in all of my, to one of these AI bots that says see what college you'll be a good fit for and where you could get in. I took all of my, my high school GPA, my SAT scores, what else? My family income, the fact that I was a triple legacy at Duke. My parents and brother had all gone there. And I put all these things, also my extracurricular activities, I put all these things into the AI engine and said, what are my chances of getting into Duke? And it came back 3%. I had a 3% chance of getting into the college that I went to. And in 1977, when I went, so I'm revealing how old I am, it was the only college I applied to. There was, not a lot of pressure that you had to worry about it too much about where you were going to get in. I mean, maybe a little, but I was a good student. I had, I'd been the class president. I think I put that into the AI bot. I went to a large high school. I had a good GPA. And wow. So I was so astounded by how much more competitive it had become that I wish I'd had that when my own children, were going through this gauntlet. And I don't think I appreciated how much more competitive it had become and the mental health effects that had on them when when they were struggling to, win the game.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Our last interview on our podcast was with Christoph Gutentag, Duke's dean, and he shared in 1992 when he got there, they had 12,000 apps and they may hit 60,000 this year.
Wow.
And so you're going back 15 years before that, just to show how much the world has changed.
Yeah,
right?
and I think when I applied to college, I believe the college going rate was, people even attending college was something like, or maybe it was the degree rate. Sorry, the degree attainment rate was something like 15% of people rather than the 38% it is now. So, a lot more people have a degree now and are trying to get one. Although in the last 10 years, those numbers have dropped pretty dramatically, per the trends that we're discussing today.
Now, Kathleen, you talk about the 150 interviews you did to prepare for the book with all different types of people from different walks of life. Why don't you talk about those interviews and what you learned from them?
Yeah, well, I divided it into a couple of categories of, employers, colleges, high school advisors, people who are on the front lines of helping, kids decide whether and where they're going to go directly to college, and then families. And I used a human-centered design kind of methodology for the book, because that's what we use at the Education Design Lab, the organization I started, where, to design new forms of higher education, we look at the end user, like what is the learner and what are different kinds of learners experiencing, and what are their barriers. And so when you understand the barriers and the motivations and you put those two together, you can then see what kind of solutions would solve their issues and remove the barriers. And so that's how I approach the interviews and the book, for each of these sets of stakeholders. And I would say that, perhaps your audience might be, most interested in what learners and families were saying. And what I saw most from learners and families was that the narrative that they're hearing, that's coming both at 10,000 feet, from what they hear, what they read, and what their friends may be telling them, and their neighbors and their, uncles, are sending a set of signals that are kind of, basically hurting the reputation of going to college, and specifically going into debt to do it. I mean, when I talk to, lower income families, particularly the kids, interesting, more than the parents, like the parents were willing to go into debt, but some of the kids were like, I don't want my parents, to be in that kind of debt. I don't want to be in that kind of debt because I'm not even sure this is worth it. That was sort of, a lot of the mantra that I heard when I went to, high schools where, like, I went to a couple of charter high schools and, sat in on the senior seminars where students were, having, at some of these charter schools, everybody has to apply to college. And, the idea is that everyone is college ready. And so how do you then, navigate that if you're somebody who is feeling really, hamstrung about the decision? Like one young man said to me, I hear all this, that you got to go to college, you got to go to college. And yet I feel like if I don't go, I'm nothing. And, this was a young man whose parents had not been to college, but he felt his parents had like sacrificed everything. They'd moved to Denver, Colorado so that he could go to this charter school. And yet he just felt that it was too much, of sitting in a classroom for 4 more years. That's not what he wanted to do. He wanted to be, work with his hands and become a businessman, entrepreneur, and he just didn't feel he needed college for that. But yet the pressure was so intense. That's one example of a family member. And if you want, I could talk about like what we heard from employers or...
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Yeah. Okay, so employers, interestingly, so I went to the employers who I saw were hiring people without degrees, because to me, that kind of shows like they're kind of early adopters in a system where there'll be fewer people with degrees as more people either decide not to get a full degree, or we're also just experiencing a decline in birth rates, and there are going to be many fewer students in college over the next decade. Those factors will kind of force employers to think differently about who they recruit and what they put on their job descriptions. Some college degree required, or like skills, like if not college, what skills do you need? And there's this whole movement around what's called skills-based hiring, where employers are trying to think more openly about, okay, do I really need the degree for that role? Or could I just name the skills that I need someone to be able to demonstrate? So some employers are really kind of looking toward and using more like industry certifications to decide upon their hires in areas like tech in cybersecurity, where there's some shortages, but also in like financial services. I interview an apprentice, somebody who started apprenticing in high school, and she was able to work her way up to being an underwriter at an insurance company. And another young man that got certificates in high school through his career and technical education program, just courses he took in data security in high school, and was able to get hired at AWS, Amazon Web Services, without, he thought he was going to community college, but he got kind of intercepted along the way, right? And this isn't going to happen for everyone, but if you have a mindset from employers and high schools and counselors that that we have these other tracks that can work for you, that you can either do to help pay for college, or you can start out doing these jobs and think about college as something you might add on later, which is what I advocate, a stepladder approach.
Now, I know in your book you do talk about 4 types of students who will need college. Who are those for?
Yeah, so the first group is sort of who I mentioned when I said some fields, some job roles will always require, maybe not always, but at least until the shortages are so bad that they're forced to change, they will require degrees. And those include, medicine, some fields of medicine, lawyers for the most part, accounting, teaching fields. I think I've mentioned that already. So yes, some fields, there's a license, and to get the license, you pretty much need a degree. I did learn that in California, that you can actually get all the way to practicing law without any degrees. There's like a loophole, but you have to be an apprentice. But that's the only state where I could find that was the case. So that's kind of interesting. But so that's type 1, is what I call license to workers. Like you have to have a degree. The second category are families where probably the mom, maybe the dad say, I don't want my, I came to this country. I don't want my kid to have to work as hard as I do. And I want them to have a better life, but I don't know how to help them get there. So what I call that class transporters, where you're coming in often as an immigrant and you don't know the steps to how to get to the middle class. And a college degree is a great guide and, handholder to do that. If you can, come up with the funding, and you have a child who is, a willing participant. So that would be the second group. The third group, I call legitimacy labeler. And that's someone where moving economic classes might not be the issue, but you might just not have the confidence yourself that you are taken seriously. I know I had this problem in the 80s as I was a reporter in the South, as a woman, and I didn't feel taken seriously, and I felt like my Duke degree, and then I wanted to be a foreign correspondent, and I thought I needed the Harvard degree in foreign policy to make myself legitimate. Like these felt like legitimacy labels that I needed because at the time I wasn't taken seriously. And I still think there's a lot of that goes on, and you can look at student debt statistics and see who is taking on the most debt. And I will tell you, it's women, and it's specifically women of color are taking on more debt, proportionately than their counterparts in other demographics. And so I would say many people believe they need it for legitimacy. And then the last category, which might include the folks on this listening to this podcast, is really if you have a young person who really kind of craves the community and the structure of the cohort nature of college. I'm in the class of 2029, and I'm launched into this cohort, and they're going to tell me what to do, and they're going to show me how to get there. If your child needs that structure, and you feel they are again a willing participant, and there's enough funding to to pull it off, or if there's not funding, use a community college pathway. I think college really helps that cohort of folks. So those are the 4 categories where I feel like college is really helpful, and there's not really a replacement for it.
So what would you say? I had a call from a podcast listener who's hiring manager on the really high up, and she was pushing back aggressively at sort of the people out there talking about not how you don't need college. She said most of them have a degree, first of all, but she also said in her world, she's noticed that you run into dead ends at promotions at certain levels without the degree. Mm-hmm. Do you think there's truth to that?
I think there has been truth to that. And I mean, again, it really depends what field. Let's say like HR or, certain aspects of business or compliance. If you're a compliance officer, you can hit a ceiling for sure. I believe that is changing pretty radically since the pandemic and will continue to change because you now can get any of the kind of certifications you need. You can get through like micro credentials. Like I'm not saying that your caller's friend or your caller is probably right talking about the past, but I think the present and the future are demonstrating that there are much shorter ways to get the credibility and the expertise that you need to move to the next level. Because of this notion that skills are moving so fast, we now have AI in the mix, which we can talk about, which also changes things. Will be changing things dramatically. But I was on the phone just before this interview with a professor, a business school professor in Oklahoma, who said, what he's seeing, because he's also an employer, what he's seeing is that the currency of the day now in business is micro-credentials, not degrees.
Friends, this concludes this segment of my interview with Kathleen. Hope you join us next week for the next segment. On Thursday's episode, we'll have a question from a listener who wants to know, how should I select an independent college counselor? And Lisa will join me to answer that question. We'll have part 2 of 4 of my interview about every FAQ I could think of about 529 plans. And that interview is with Julia Shields-Retna and Jonathan Hughes. And then we'll have another question from a listener because you guys are sending them in. Susan will join me to answer a question from a listener in suburban Philly who wants to know, is it ever a bad idea to submit a test score because your test score is too high for that institution? Friends, I close you out with some wisdom from the great Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you'll get every single episode as soon as it is released. If you're interested, there are a few ways you can really support our podcast. You can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can help us pay our staff and our expenses by donating on our website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. I'm the producer of the podcast, but we have a fantastic team of 15. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff, Dr. David Williams, Linda Depker, Susan Tree, Vince Garcia, and Julia Esquivel. And to our substitute co-host, Sylvia Borgo. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs are from Kimberly Blass. Lily Parikh manages our Instagram. Our image editor is Talha Khan. Joyce Ducker does our website episode updates. And our webmaster is Stalianos Dimitriou. And if you want to have a coaching session with Lisa, Linda, or me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you have a question you want us to answer, or if you have a recommended resource or article you think we should discuss, just send it to questions@yourcollegeboundkid.com. Our favorite method is for you to record your own voice at speakpipe.com/YCBK. By the way, check out our website, where you'll find lots of content that is not on any podcast app. Our website is yourcollegeboundkid.com. If you want to learn about other hot admissions topics, follow us on Twitter at YCBK Podcast. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting again with you every single Monday and Thursday.